Gustav waited in his hiding spot and started to giggle. His brother George still hadn't found him. He had heard all 6 of his other siblings being discovered, but Gustav had picked a place where he would never be found. For sure. He was in the oven, making himself quite comfortable. After a while, however, Gustav got rather bored. It seemed like no one was looking for him anymore. Once again, he had been forgotten. Angry, he slowly climbed out of the oven and went to the playroom he had to share with his siblings. That was another thing that really got on his nerves. He always had to share everything, and he was constantly being teased. When he saw his siblings getting ready for bed, he shouted, "You didn't find me at all! I won!" "Nobody even wanted to find you, and you didn't win anything," George shouted back. This made Gustav so angry that he stuck his head in the sand, just as ostriches do. "Not again," grumbled George. Gustav stuck his head in the sand more often than all his other ostrich siblings put together. But there were many things that annoyed him, Gustav thought, and mean siblings were right at the top of the list. The next morning, as Gustav was getting ready for school and brushing his teeth, his siblings started laughing. "What is it now?" he tried to ask, but instead only bubbles came out of his mouth. Someone had swapped his toothpaste for soap again. "That is not funny," he tried to say, but only bubbles emerged. His siblings were shrieking with laughter, and Gustav stuck his head in the sand. It was a good thing their house was built on sandy ground, giving him the chance to retreat in every room whenever things got too much. At least until the laughing finally stopped. When will the teasing ever end? Gustav thought, staying buried in the sand for a record amount of time. When he finally came back up, all his siblings were already on their way to school, and he was all alone in the house. As he went to leave, he suddenly tripped and fell. Someone had tied his shoelaces together. Of course, he thought, what else? He had had enough. Enough of being teased, enough of sharing everything, just enough. Angrily, he packed his things, but not for school. He had decided to run away from his annoying, silly siblings. On his way, he finally reached the forest. His parents had forbidden him from going into the woods alone, but what did they know? As long as he stayed on the path, nothing would happen to him. Suddenly he heard a noise beside him. Was that the wolf his parents had warned him about? He stuck his head in the sand and waited with trembling legs to be eaten. When nothing happened after a while, he slowly dared to come out again. Gustav looked around cautiously, but saw nothing. He was about to walk on when something suddenly startled him. Someone shouted, "Hello!" Once again he stuck his head in the sand, more out of habit than actual fear. This time, however, he came out quite quickly. Are you looking for something in the sand there?" the voice asked. "Can I help you?" No, replied Gustav, feeling quite embarrassed. "I'm Gustav. I'm looking for a new home," he shouted, trying to change the subject. "Oh, I'm Hutu," said the voice, which he could now see belonged to an owl sitting on a branch next to him. "But why a new home? What was so bad about the old one?" "Oh," said Gustav, "too many siblings." "Siblings, eh? I'd love to have siblings," Hutu replied. "Then, at least, I'd have someone to play with. It's terribly boring here in the forest all by myself, and the animals from outside are just too scared to visit me." "I'm not scared," Gustav shouted proudly, hoping Hutu wouldn't see right through him. Together, they set off to find Gustav a new home. Eventually, they came to a cave, and Hutu asked if it wouldn't be the perfect place to live. But Gustav pondered, thinking, what if somebody else already lives there? But Hutu just flew right into the cave, so Gustav followed. The cave was dark, cold, and somehow eerie. Gustav really wanted to stick his head into the sand right then, but the cave floor was too hard, and besides, he wanted to prove to Hutu how brave he was. So he pulled himself together, and they went further in. Nobody here but us, Hutu called out, and Gustav breathed a sigh of relief. It's getting dark outside, Hutu continued. We can stay here tonight and see if it's a good home for you. After Gustav finally lay down, and it was pitch black outside, he tried to fall asleep. But every noise startled him, and he couldn't even stick his head in the sand here. Finally, he managed to fall asleep. But some time later he woke up in a panic. He had heard something. Right outside the cave, he was sure of it. Slowly and quietly, he crept to the cave entrance to get a better look. But he couldn't see anything. He was just about to turn back when he suddenly saw a shadow. The wolf, he thought, and tried to stick his head in the sand. But since the floor was hard stone, he only got a bump on his head and cursed loudly. The shadow stood motionless at first, but then came closer. Gustav's whole body trembled. He closed his eyes and shouted, "Please don't eat me, please!" But when he opened his eyes, there was only a tiny mouse standing in front of him, who was frightened by Gustav's shouting, and it fled back into the forest. When the night was finally over, Hutu asked, "Well, is the cave your new home?" But Gustav wanted nothing more than to go back to his family. Even being teased was much better than living alone in the forest. If Hutu hadn't been with him, he would have rushed home the night before. "I have to go back. My family must be worried," he shouted instead, and Hutu just nodded. As he approached his house, he could already see his siblings, who all seemed to be looking for something. When they finally recognized him, they came running and hugged him wildly. "Where have you been?" they all asked at once. "In the forest," Gustav shouted. "As if a scaredy cat like you would dare go into the forest," George shouted. But he hugged him just a little bit tighter. "Gustav played with me in the forest, and then it got very late, so we stayed in a cave," Hutu suddenly called out. "And Gustav isn't a scaredy cat at all. He's the bravest ostrich I have ever seen." From that day on, whenever his siblings got too much for him, Gustav could go and play with his friend Hutu in the forest.